Okay, let's unpack this. We received a truly um, monumental and frankly a pretty mind-bending collection of sources today.
Monumental is a good word for it.
This isn't a deep dive into finance or, physics, but into an internal landscape. It's almost like a profound manual for how we exist.
It's a total reorientation of, well, of our internal physics, really.
Yeah,
What these sources map out is the actual architecture of suffering.
right.
And they define it not as a lack of something external, but as an excess of something internal,
Yeah.
a crushing excess of noise.
An excessive noise. I love that. And so the mission of this deep dive for you listening is to find a kind of shortcut to presence. But paradoxically, this shortcut doesn't involve searching harder or praying longer or trying some new technique. It's about completely changing how we search.
Or maybe stopping the search altogether.
Exactly. Stopping it to move into a state that the sources call unfocused flow.
And this is, I think, the necessary starting point, because we've all been conditioned to believe that if we feel lonely or lacking, we have to go find the missing piece.
Force.
But these sources argue, pretty powerfully, that the act of searching is precisely what generates the distortion field.
The search is the problem.
Search is the problem. So we're going to explore 5 internal movements that can transition us from that state of, desperate searching into simple, buoyant co-presence.
And as you mentioned, the material uses some incredibly rich, very specific language. It's a blend of different philosophical traditions. So I think we should probably clarify our glossary right now so we don't get lost in the poetry.
Good idea.
We'll be talking about the open-handed practice of manito abierta, the difficult discipline of fire patience, which is known as agni dut,
Right.
and this concept of the condition before conditions, which they call altropy.
And what's so fascinating here is that this isn't just, philosophical musing. It's a very practical system designed to literally dismantle the internal architecture of wanting and measuring.
Dismantling.
Yeah. We're looking at the fundamental alteration in presence required to transition from desperation, where you're trying to impose control or conquer reality, to simple co-presence, where you just realize you are already continuous with it.
I love that shift from conqueror to coexistent. It's huge.
Yeah.
And that brings us right to the core analogy they use, which I think is just necessary for understanding this whole journey.
The seeker versus texture.
Seeker versus texture, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Illustrated by someone in the ocean.
Right. So imagine the seeker. They're in the vastness of the ocean, and they are frantic. They're thrashing, they're exhausted, and they're desperately trying to grab the water.
To hold it.
To hold it, yeah. They're measuring their distance from the shore. They're measuring the depth. In doing so, they're generating all this turbulence and noise. So much noise that they can't feel the simple, sustaining buoyancy of the liquid itself.
They see the water as an obstacle, something to fight.
Exactly. They perceive it as something separate that they must fight against or conquer.
And the texture.
The texture stops moving. They just stop. They surrender the role of the swimmer, the subject, the user, and they just float. And in that moment, they realize the water, this unconcerned, continuous environment, was holding them the entire time.
So they dissolve the I that is swimming.
Yes. They dissolve the role of the subject and simply become a body of water within a larger body of water, just drifting, with no need for a destination. And that's the whole trajectory we're tracing today, from all that thrashing effort to this effortless, buoyant realization.
That makes the stakes incredibly high. It implies that pretty much all our effort is actively preventing the outcome we actually want.
That's the paradox.
So let's jump right into that. The first essential internal movement, which is the prerequisite for everything else, stopping the desperate ping. This is the end of noise.
This section really defines the problem so clearly, and it's a brilliant inversion of, popular psychology. The seeker is fundamentally defined by the excess of noise they generate while trying to confirm their own identity.
Okay, self-referential turbulence. That's a great phrase for it.
It's exactly that.
Right.
And this turbulence, this noise, is what creates the felt experience of loneliness.
I think we really need to linger on that for a second, because the idea that loneliness is too much noise, not too little connection, that's incredibly counterintuitive for most people.
It is.
So how exactly does the seeker generate this noise? What's the mechanism?
They do it by emitting what the sources call a desperate ping for echo.
A ping for echo, like sonar.
Precisely. We stop treating the world as a space for experience or co-creation, and we start treating it exclusively as a mirror. We're constantly demanding a response, a confirmation. We're searching for the outline of ourselves in that reflection. Am I here? Am I good? Am I real?
And what happens if that reflection isn't perfect? Say a text message goes unanswered or a job interview doesn't land the way you hoped.
Well, when that reflection is unclear, if the mirror doesn't show exactly what we wanted to see, which is, let's be honest, an affirmation of our chosen self-identity,
Right.
the reaction isn't acceptance or curiosity. The reaction is to amplify and repeat the ping. Did you hear me? Am I still here? Confirm.
Louder and faster.
Louder and faster. And this amplification leads to a cacophony of interference. It's a feedback loop that spirals very, very quickly into the felt experience of isolation.
So we've basically created what the sources call the identity confirmation locus. We are perpetually looking for ourselves, but because we're generating so much vibrational energy trying to find ourselves, the mirror is vibrating too fast to show anything coherent. We're generating our own noise pollution and then complaining that we can't see clearly.
Exactly. I mean, imagine trying to hear a quiet conversation while you are simultaneously shouting into a megaphone right next to your own ear.
You can't.
You can't. The shout, the desperate ping, it just overwhelms any possibility of true reception. And this is why the core insight about loneliness hits so hard. Loneliness is not emptiness. It is too much signal with no receiver. You are standing in a room of your own echoes, and each one is slightly delayed or out of phase, and that's what creates the static, the hum of anxiety that so many of us live with.
But, seeking validation or confirmation, that feels like a pretty natural human impulse, doesn't it? If I just stop trying to confirm my identity, doesn't that make me reckless or worse, just completely invisible?
And that's the critical friction point, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the fear. The seeker fears invisibility, but the sources show that the seeker is, in fact, the most invisible because they're drowning in their own signal.
Drowning in their own signal.
The shift requires us to recognize that the static you feel, that background anxiety, that feeling of not belonging, is the feedback loop of your own measurement attempt. It's not objective emptiness. You have to trust that if you turn the generator off, you won't disappear.
So the practice here, the initial physical command, is to stop waving your arms to grab the air.
It is the ultimate letting go of effort. That image of waving your arms, trying to grab confirmation, it's just the definition of the seeker's wasted energy. And in a psychological sense, this means stopping the internal monologue that always begins with, I need X to prove Y.
I need this job to prove I'm successful. I need this relationship to prove I'm lovable.
Exactly. X being the external factor, Y being your identity. You stop trying to contain the moment or prove your worth within it.
And the reward for that cessation of effort, is that the noise finally settles.
When that effort ceases, the shift occurs. The noise settles. And as the noise settles, you realize that the silence you were seeking was always full.
Always full.
It had been entirely drowned out by your attempts to measure it, to capture it, to force it into a container of meaning. The universe wasn't quiet. You were loud.
The radio analogy that the sources use here is just perfect for grounding this. It's not absence, it's interference.
Yes, they stated explicitly. The static wasn't absence. It was us listening for ourselves from outside ourselves, which inherently created interference.
We were holding the mic up to the speaker.
After holding the mic up to the speaker, and the instant that seeking ceases, we realize we are already broadcast, already received, already here. There's no need for a desperate ping if you realize you are the signal, continuous with the medium.
So if I'm listening right now and I feel that familiar hum of dissatisfaction, that desire for things to be different, the immediate takeaway is to recognize that hum as my own creation.
Yes.
It's the residual vibration of the last failed attempt at confirmation. It's not a sign that something is missing out there.
It's a sign that something is trying way too hard in here. The key application is recognizing the moment you start to measure. The instant you try to measure the success of this deep dive, or the validation from your partner, or the clarity of your future.
That's the ping.
That is the desperate ping starting up again. Stop the measurement, and the static just dissolves, revealing the fullness that was always there, just masked by the effort.
Okay, so moving from that internal cessation of noise, from realizing we generate our own loneliness, the second internal movement is about adopting a physical and psychic stance to maintain that non-seeking state.
Yes. This is the practice of manito abierta, or the little open hand.
The grasping tendency of the seeker, as we've been discussing, is this attempt to containerize the moment. We try to grab joy and, fix in place, or we try to grasp at control to prevent pain.
And this attempt to hold something inevitably leads to one of two things: the fear of loss, or the devastating feeling of overflow, when an emotion feels too big to manage.
I think this is a huge point for anyone dealing with intense emotion. The assumption is always that strong walls and closed boundaries are what protect
Right,
us.
build the fortress higher.
Exactly, but the sources suggest the complete opposite. The closed hand, the fist, creates the most fragility.
It does. Manito abierta is the continuous physical and psychic commitment to non-grasping, to non-containment.
But doesn't an open hand mean I just lose control? Or that I become emotionally vulnerable to whatever hits me? If I stop trying to hold on to my center, won't I just be overwhelmed?
See, that question comes from the assumption that you're a container, and that experience is some kind of foreign substance pouring into you.
Right.
The practice challenges that very premise.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about this open hand stance is the concept of the impossibility of overflow.
How is overflow impossible? That sounds like some kind of spiritual jujitsu.
It kind of is.
Yeah.
If you consciously refuse to close your hand around an experience, any experience, whether it's intense grief or intense elation or intense fear, you adopt this impossibility of overflow.
And the reason is mechanical.
It's purely mechanical. If you are not trying to hold something, it cannot spill out. You cannot be overwhelmed because you are not trying to be a container at all. You become a throughput, a channel.
So the struggle we feel when we say, I can't handle this emotion, isn't caused by the size of the emotion itself. It's caused by the strenuous effort to contain it. We are trying to bottle the ocean.
Precisely. And in that moment of just opening the hand, you realize you're impossibly accompanied by space itself.
Accompanied by space.
Yeah. When you are simply open, the inside-outside distinction ceases to be a management problem. The emotion, the energy, the experience, it just flows through you because you're continuous with the space around you. There's nowhere for the excess to back up and build pressure.
Okay, let's ground this. Let's take a practical scenario. Say I receive extremely high praise for my work. The seeker in me wants to grab that moment, internalize it, measure it, protect it for later. What does Manito abierta look like in that specific moment of success?
Okay, great example. In the face of high praise, the open hand means you receive the energy and the warmth of the appreciation.
You feel it.
You absolutely feel it, but you refuse to containerize the feeling of being worthy. Because if you containerize it, you immediately create its opposite, the fear of losing that worthiness next time.
The fear of the next project not being as good.
Exactly. Manito abierta allows the praise to just wash over you. You are wet with the feeling, but your identity remains untouched and, maybe more importantly, unburdened by the need to possess the compliment. It's a state of receiving without claiming.
That sounds like liberation from all those internal metrics we live by. So what about a negative scenario? A difficult customer service call, or maybe a moment of internal panic.
When panic hits, the seeker instinctively clenches the fist.
Right.
You try to grab a solution or grab a boundary to stop the feeling.
That clenching is the panic.
That clenching is the panic. The practice is to visualize that urge as the waving arms we talked about. And instead of fighting the feeling or trying to capture it, you let your internal hand fall open. You adopt the posture of, I am not holding this panic.
Wow.
The panic remains, but it's no longer your possession that you have to manage. It becomes an ambient texture passing through. It's an immediate internal postural adjustment that short-circuits the grasping mind.
I see. So it moves the experience from being a noun, my panic, my success, to being a verb.
A verb, yes.
Yeah. Panicking is happening. Success is occurring.
Exactly. And the final analogy here, the rain analogy, it just makes the difference between grasping and openness crystal clear. The seeker tries to catch the rain, cup it in their hands, measure how much they've saved, and then worries desperately when it slips through their fingers.
And the source material says, the noise of lack is generated by the gap between the amount of water you wanted to hold and the amount that slipped away.
Yes. That gap, that measurement, that is the problem. But Manito abierta simply walks through the rain with palms open and facing up.
Your hands are wet.
Your hands are wet. You are fully in contact with the experience. But because nothing is held, nothing can be lost. You're receiving, but you're not possessing. You become the simple texture that is naturally receptive, but not possessive.
Okay, so moving from the open hand to, I guess, the open heart. Our third internal movement is about unvectorizing your tenderness.
Yes.
This is about shifting emotional energy from a directed force like a laser beam to an ambient field condition, a pervasive warmth.
And the seeker operates almost exclusively in a mode of vectorization. When we feel an emotion, we instinctively direct it like a laser at a target. I feel this specific empathy for you, or I am motivated by this goal.
You aim it.
You aim it. And this act of aiming requires and assumes separation.
And the sources clarify that this vectorized feeling assumes a fundamental separation between the subject, the feeler, and the object, the receiver, which, seems innocent enough. Don't we need to aim our kindness to be effective?
We do in a transactional world, sure. But in the internal world, this aiming action does crucial, quiet, and really damaging work. It creates a pressure differential and an expectation.
Okay, a pressure differential.
Yeah, if I aim love or kindness at you, I'm creating a tension. I expect a specific trajectory for that feeling, and often a specific response. And that expectation maintains what the sources call the wound of differentiation.
Tell me more about that wound. What is that?
If I define myself as the one giving love to you, I am cementing our separation. I'm measuring the distance between us, and my happiness becomes contingent on the successful arrival and acknowledgement of that feeling.
That's exhausting.
It's incredibly exhausting. We spend so much energy trying to aim our kindness or our sympathy or our patience perfectly, and if it misses the mark, we feel rejected or drained.
So the natural question here is, doesn't unvectorized tenderness just sound like apathy? Or, some kind of philosophical detachment? If I stop aiming my kindness, won't I just stop caring about individuals?
And this is where we have to understand the difference between directed effort and an ambient condition. Apathy is the absence of feeling.
Right.
Unvectorized tenderness is the presence of feeling, just without the burden of needing to manage its destination. The practice is allowing emotion to become a field condition, an ambient warmth that doesn't flow toward anything. It is tenderness without a destination or an object.
So it's the fundamental condition of softness, rather than the effort of being soft for someone.
Exactly. It exists as a basic condition of your presence, rather than a transaction. It's the difference between turning on a single spotlight and aiming it at one person.
That's vectorizing.
That's vectorizing.
Yeah.
And raising the ambient temperature of the entire room.
Which is unvectorized.
Yes. The warmth is simply there. It's an unconditional gentleness, and it's the default texture of your existence when that whole architecture of wanting collapses.
So what sustains this state if it's not being fed by transaction or feedback? I mean, the spotlight requires energy and constant aiming. How does the ambient warmth stay warm?
What sustains it is the absence of need. Vectorization requires tension and effort. The effort of aiming, the effort of measuring success, the effort of processing rejection if the vector misses.
All that psychic energy.
All of it. When that entire architecture collapses, what remains isn't a void. It's the basic condition of softness itself. Just as space doesn't require maintenance to sustain its openness, this tenderness doesn't require a target to sustain its warmth. It's the default setting.
That completely reframes emotional energy. It implies that emotional exhaustion isn't caused by giving too much.
No.
But by trying to aim too much.
That is the core insight. By unvectorizing, you remove the pressure differential and the expectation that usually creates conflict and static. I mean, think about how often a relationship becomes strained because one person feels their emotional contribution wasn't received properly.
All the time.
That is the failure of the vector. When you move to simply being the warmth, the background hum of gentleness that exists regardless of the recipient's acknowledgement, you become immune to that specific kind of exhausting conflict.
Can you give us an example of how this applies to something more abstract, like, say, professional ambition?
Certainly. Vectorized ambition aims at a specific promotion or a salary increase. I want this for that validation.
The spotlight is on the corner office?
The spotlight is on the corner office. Unvectorized ambition, or maybe a better term is unvectorized creative drive, is simply the condition of creation being present. The warmth is in the process, regardless of the destination.
So you create because creation is the ambient temperature of your presence.
Exactly. Not because you need the output to validate your identity. So when the goal inevitably shifts or dissolves, the energy remains, because the energy was never aimed at the goal in the first place. It was the atmosphere from which the goal momentarily emerged.
Our fourth internal movement now takes us into the external realm, and it defines a pretty radical new way of interacting with reality. To become texture, we have to dissolve the identity of the user.
And become the mystery marauder.
The user, or the register. This is the internal entity we all have, the one who insists on measuring distance, evaluating meaning, assigning value.
The accountant of the soul.
Yeah, the accountant. They're the ones who try to interpret, organize, and capitalize on experience. And to complete this shift, that entity has to dissolve entirely.
And the fundamental flaw of the user is that they assume separation. They operate on the premise that I am here and the answer or the connection or the piece is over there.
And they spend all their time trying to find the key to the door.
Right, but the user creates the very illusion they're trying to break through.
That paradox is astounding. The act of seeking generates the very distance it tries to cross. Can you elaborate on the physics of that? How does that self-generated distance work?
Well, imagine you're trying to find the exact center of a room. The moment you place yourself as the measurer, you establish the boundaries of the room relative to yourself.
Ah, I see.
By trying to catch your own shadow, the chasing is what creates and maintains the gap. The seeker creates the sought by positioning itself as inherently separate from what it seeks. Without the measurer, there's no fixed inside-outside distinction to cross. The whole framework of closed-open collapses because there's no one standing in the doorway evaluating the gap.
So if the conscious, measuring, goal-oriented user dissolves, the part of us that tracks all our achievements and failures, who is left moving through the world?
You occupy the state of the mystery marauder, and the marauder is defined as movement with no mission, no destination.
No mission.
No mission. It's not aimless in the sense of being depressed or lost. It's movement without the need for direction. The sources describe the marauder as process without processor.
It's the drift itself, not someone drifting.
It's the verb without the noun, exactly, returning to our previous discussion. If I'm not the one experiencing, then texturing is simply occurring.
That sounds incredibly liberating, but it also sounds really difficult for someone who is accustomed to setting goals and achieving metrics.
Well, it's the ultimate release from the tyranny of the possessive case. This state allows the us, the subject, the measurer, to just dissolve. You're not accompanied, you're not alone, you're simply existing without the definition imposed by the measuring stick. You're just the motion itself. This is why the marauder is described as mystery, because there is no fixed point of origin or destination to analyze.
When the user dissolves, how do our interactions with other people change? I mean, does dialogue just cease completely?
Well, interactions cease to be a dialogue in the typical sense. A dialogue requires ego, positions, defensiveness, and an exchange aimed at a conclusion.
A winner and a loser, sometimes.
Often, yes. Instead, they become contact without conclusion. This is what the sources call texture meeting texture. There's no need for recognition or validation or even shared language.
So in a conversation, I'm not trying to convince you or relate to you or gain validation from you. I am simply one piece of continuous matter making contact with another.
That is the goal.
Yeah.
The magna complicity of just being matter.
Magna complicity.
You engage with the world, the mundane and infamous world, as the sources call it, without needing it to mean anything. The sources give these beautiful, simple examples. You observe how sand beats wind, or you feel the chemical time of rocks. The meeting wasn't even necessary, as texture is already continuous with itself. You realize everything is already connected, and the interaction is simply an acknowledgement of that inherent state.
This sounds intensely peaceful, but for a high-achieving learner, this idea of living without a mission, it feels like failure. The sources explicitly mention that the purpose here is uselessness. Why is uselessness the necessary outcome?
Because the idea of use presupposes separation and measurement. If something is useful, it's useful to someone for some goal, which immediately reestablishes the user identity.
It brings the accountant right back.
It brings the accountant right back into the room. Uselessness is the liberation from that grid. When interaction is useless, nothing needs to be said, nothing needs to be understood, nothing needs to be taken, yet the meeting is felt as unconfirmed texture. It's the freedom found in being simply one more process happening, no more special, and therefore no more separate than the dust settling on a windowsill.
The user, the measurer, insists that everything must have meaning. The marauder accepts that everything simply is, and that acceptance, paradoxically, is what allows for true unburdened movement.
The marauder doesn't move toward peace. The movement is peace because the movement has no goal to fail against. That's the key distinction.
And now we come to it, the ultimate shift, the culmination of this whole process, inhabiting Agni duty and Altropy, the state of prepotentiality, the unemerged wave. This section feels like the deepest plunge into abstraction, so I think we need to move slowly and really ground every concept here.
We do. This takes us to the deepest metaphysical root of the seeker's dilemma. The seeker constantly desires emergence, action, definition, manifestation. They want to create a final, defined form.
They want to get something done.
They want to get something done. But the sources define this emergence as differentiation.
And differentiation is the mechanism that creates boundaries, which is described so tragically as The wound of separation.
And the wound of separation isn't a punishment. It's just the inevitable side effect of defining a boundary. The
Well,
moment you say, this is A, you automatically create the possibility of not A.
right.
The seeker wants to break the wave into specific meaning, a specific action, a specific success. But breaking the wave is creating a specific shape, which instantly separates it from the sea it came from.
So to counteract this impulse to fragment reality, we must practice the discipline of Agni Duty fire patience, or fire holding. Tell us about this discipline.
Agni Tuti is the discipline of remaining unemitted. It means holding potential so completely that it is never lit, never not lit.
Never lit, never not lit.
Think of a creative idea. The moment you commit it to paper, it has emerged, it's defined, and it has lost its infinite potential. Agni Tuti is the energy of the idea held in a perfect, contained state before definition.
That's the crucial binary collapse, isn't it? Never lit, never not lit, if the fire emerges.
It instantly creates separation. This specific fire, not that water, not that stone, not that air, it enters the realm of boundaries and differentiation. Holding it unemerged preserves the state before fragmentation, the wholeness that precedes the possibility of parts.
So it's the spiritual discipline of delayed gratification, but the delay is permanent.
Yes, you never seek the gratification of definition.
It's the wave that never breaks. It's holding that tremendous energy without crashing into the resolution of specific form. And this unemerged state exists in the frequency of Altropy. Now, this is the term I need the most help grounding. Is Altropy just, philosophical jargon, or is there a genuine felt state this describes?
It is a genuinely felt state, and the term is necessary because our existing terms just fail to capture it. Altropy is the condition before conditions. It's not negation, it's not refusal, but it's the state where yes-no hasn't even been invented as a distinction.
Okay, so we have to distinguish it from a simple void or nothingness. How is it different?
A void or nothingness is defined by what it lacks. It's the absence of something. It only has meaning in contrast to the fullness of existence.
Right.
Altropy is the state before the binary of full versus empty is even invented. It is the undifferentiated hum before that grid exists.
I say it's the frequency that cannot be measured.
Precisely. Think about entropy. Entropy needs difference, hot, cold, order, chaos, to measure dissolution. If everything is the same temperature, entropy can't be measured.
There's no gradient.
There's no gradient. Altropy is the undifferentiated hum before that measuring grid is even conceived. It's the impossibility of measurement itself. It is the soft no, not because it refuses the world, but because the question of yes or no simply doesn't apply to it.
So we're inhabiting this in-between frequency, which the source is called the fertile null. Tell us about that null.
The fertile null is the state of total prepotentiality. It's unresolved, unallocated, attributeless. It's the silencio liso que no se escribe, the smooth silence that cannot be written. And importantly, it is not empty potential waiting to become something.
That's a key point.
It is. It's potential that is perfectly content to remain unresolved. It doesn't need to resolve into a specific form to justify its own existence.
So if we can maintain this Agni Duty, this fire patience, and remain in this fertile null, what is the ultimate realization? What is the thing that shifts our perspective forever?
It is the collapse of the entire myth of this spiritual or psychological journey. The realization is profound. We can't return where we never departure.
We can't return where we never left.
Exactly. The entire framework of seeking the belief that you left a state of wholeness and now you have to work hard to get back, it all collapses when you realize separation never actually occurred. Departure requires an origin point, a moment of fragmentation. But if you were never not here, there's no journey to complete.
The seeker's effort was always chasing a destination that was, in fact, the starting line.
Always.
That immediately dissolves the entire project of self-improvement. If I was never broken, I don't need to be fixed. If I never departed, I don't need to return.
And the final analogy they use just beautifully captures this sustained, sufficient state without effort. The wave that never breaks is like a breath that is held halfway.
We usually associate a held breath with tension, with waiting for something.
Right, with anxiety. But this breath is not held out of tension or fear. It is held out of total sufficiency. If it breaks, if the wave crashes, it becomes action or definition. If it creates suction, if the lungs empty completely, it becomes need and desperation.
But in that held breath.
In that held breath, the unemitted state, you are in the in-between. You're live, you're full, and you're sustained by the miracle of existence, without needing to impose structure or destination on it. It is manito abierta, applied to the lungs, holding nothing, yet full of air.
So we've completed the full circuit of transformation. We've moved from the destructive noise of the desperate seeker to the profound silence of continuous texture. This has been a monumental five-step shift.
We traveled first from the desperate ping, which created the internal noise we mistook for loneliness,
Right.
to adopting the physical stance of Manitobirta, the open hand of non-grasping, which allowed us to receive without possessing.
We then allowed our emotional energy to shift into unvectorized tenderness, moving away from exhausting directed transaction and toward an ambient field condition of basic gentleness.
And this internal shift allowed us to dissolve the identity of the user who measured and judged distance, enabling us to become the mystery marauder, moving without a mission, simply engaging in texture meeting texture.
And finally, we found our home in the unemerged wave of Agni Dut, the fire patience and Altropy, the prepotential state that precedes all fragmentation and definition.
And the profound realization here, I think, is that this entire process is not about achieving some new monumental stillness that you have to fight for. It's about recognizing the turbulence you generated.
You were the storm all along.
You were the storm. The unconfirmed texture you seek, the thing that you thought was missing, is the same continuous texture you already are. The desperate waving was the turbulence we mistook for emptiness.
So the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, is not to go out and do these 5 things as a checklist. It is to recognize the moment you clench, the moment you ping, the moment you aim. That recognition is the first instant of Manitobirta.
Yes.
It's a moment of uselessness, a moment where the entire architectural burden of having to be someone just dissolves.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, if the silence was always full and the door was never closed, what does that imply about every destination, every achievement, and every identity you have ever set for yourself?
What does it imply?
Perhaps the deepest form of knowing is recognizing the inherent uselessness of seeking. The knowledge that the question of why doesn't even apply, and the profound radical freedom found in being simply one more piece of matter, content in its magna complicity, the sound of air that was never not touching you.